We're counting down the 15 British poor man's dinners your nan used to make. These are the meals that filled hungry bellies when the rent was due and the larder was bare, dishes born of necessity that somehow became the taste of home. From watery broths stretched to feed 6 on nothing, to clever concoctions that turned scraps into something almost celebratory. Each entry tells the story of a Britain that knew how to make do. Expect ingredients that cost pennies, recipes passed between neighbors, and the quiet ingenuity of kitchens where waste was unthinkable. Which forgotten favorite tops the list? Let's begin our countdown with number 15. Kettle broth stood as the last resort when the cupboard held nothing but an onion and a handful of oatmeal, yet it filled bellies and warmed hearts when nothing else could. Housewives boiled water in the kettle, poured it over sliced onions in a bowl, then stirred in a spoonful of oatmeal and a pinch of salt. The result was thin, pale, and unremarkable to look at, but it was hot, and it was something. In the industrial towns of the 1930s and the 1940s, kettle broth appeared on tables at the end of the week when wages had run out and payday was still distant. Children slurped the watery soup without complaint, knowing that this was supper and there would be no second helpings. Mothers watched with quiet desperation, stretching the pot with extra water if another mouth arrived unexpectedly. Oral histories from the Lancashire mill towns recall the taste of kettle broth as the taste of hard times. A dish that no one chose but everyone knew. The smell was faint, the flavor barely there, yet for thousands of families it meant the difference between eating and going without. By the 1960s, as wages rose and fridges filled, kettle broth vanished from memory almost as quickly as it had arrived at the table. Today it survives only in the stories of the oldest generation, a ghost of the suppers that kept Britain alive when there was nothing left to give. Number 14. Fish head soup made use of what the fishmonger threw away, a dish that demanded nothing but patience and the willingness to see treasure where others saw waste. Housewives collected the heads of cod, haddock, or whiting for just a penny or two, knowing that hours of simmering would draw out a broth rich enough to feed the family. The heads were scrubbed, split, and set to boil with onions, potatoes, and a bay leaf, the kitchen filling with a smell that was unmistakably of the sea. By 1952, fish head soup appeared on tables in coastal towns from Grimsby to Penzance, its cloudy broth and flakes of cheek meat the reward for those who knew the old ways. Children picked at the bones, fathers claimed the tender morsels behind the eyes, and mothers stretched the pot across 2 days with extra water and a handful of barley. Oral histories recall the ritual of visiting the fishmonger at closing time, hoping for the heads that would otherwise be swept into the gutter. The taste was delicate, the texture silky, and the satisfaction of a meal conjured from nothing was quiet but real. Yet fish head soup could not survive the supermarket age. The fishmongers closed, the heads were ground into meal, and the skills required to prepare them faded. Today, fish head soup is a memory, its recipe preserved only in the kitchens of those who still remember when waste was unthinkable. Number 13. Grey peas and bacon anchored the Midlands table with a simplicity that belied its importance. The dish stretched a few rashers into a feast for the whole family. Housewives soaked dried grey peas overnight, then simmered them for hours with a piece of bacon or a ham bone until the peas turned soft and the kitchen filled with a smoky, earthy scent. By 1955, grey peas appeared on market stalls in Nottingham and Leicester, ladled into bowls and eaten with hunks of bread. The taste was rich and porky, the texture thick enough to coat the back of a spoon, and the color a pale greenish-brown that children eyed with suspicion until the first mouthful silenced their doubts. Fathers returned from the factories grateful for a dish that filled without fuss, while mothers took quiet pride in a meal that cost almost nothing but satisfied everyone. Oral histories recall the smell drifting through terrace streets, the arguments over who got the bacon rind, and the way a single bone could flavor batch after batch. Yet grey peas could not survive the supermarket age unchanged. The dried peas vanished from shelves, replaced by frozen and canned alternatives that bore little resemblance to the original. Today, grey peas and bacon survive only at Nottingham's Goose Fair and in the long memories of those who grew up when the peapot was never empty. Rissoles turned Monday's leftovers into something almost new, a dish that made virtue of the scrapings from Sunday's roast. Housewives minced whatever meat remained on the bone, mixed it with cold mashed potato, a spoonful of gravy, and a pinch of herbs, then shaped the lot into flat cakes and fried until golden. By the early 1950s, rissoles appeared on tables across Britain, their crispy exteriors and soft, savory centers, the answer to the question of what to do with what was left. Children watched mothers scrape the last shreds from the joint, learning early that nothing could be wasted. The smell of frying rissoles filled kitchens on Monday evenings, a signal that the week's thrift had begun. Served with pickles, brown sauce, or a pool of leftover gravy, rissoles were the meal that asked nothing but gave everything. Oral histories recall the pride in a well-shaped batch, the arguments over who got the crispiest edge, and the quiet satisfaction of a supper that cost nothing at all. Yet rissoles could not survive the supermarket revolution. The ready meals that filled the freezers offered convenience without effort, and the art of stretching Sunday's roast faded with each passing generation. Today, rissoles are a rarity, their memory preserved only in the stories of those who still remember when leftovers were a beginning, not an end. Number 11. Mock duck brought the illusion of plenty to tables that could not afford the real thing, a dish born of wartime necessity and kept alive by habit. Housewives layered sliced potatoes with sage and onion stuffing in a baking dish, sometimes adding a few rashers of bacon if the budget allowed, then roasted until the top crisped and the kitchen filled with a scent that almost resembled a proper roast. In the 1940s and the 1950s, mock duck appeared on tables across Britain, its golden crust and savory filling the answer to meat rationing and empty purses. Children were told it was as good as the real thing, and some believed it, while fathers ate without complaint, grateful for a hot meal that looked like a feast. The name was aspirational, a quiet joke shared between housewives who knew the truth but refused to let poverty steal their pride. Oral histories recall the ritual of the Sunday mock duck, the careful layering, and the hope that one day the real bird might return. Yet mock duck faded as prosperity arrived and chicken became cheap. Today, it is a curiosity, remembered only by those who grew up when imagination had to fill the gaps that money could not. Number 10. Bacon bones soup stretched the cheapest cut into meals for an entire week, a dish that demanded nothing but patience and a willingness to boil away the hours. Housewives bought bacon bones for just a few pence at the butcher's counter, knowing that the scraps of meat clinging to the joints would flavor pot after pot of soup. The bones were simmered with onions, carrots, and split peas or lentils until the broth turned thick and smoky, the meat falling away to be shredded back into the pot. By 1953, bacon bone soup appeared on tables across Britain, its rich, porky flavor the taste of making do. Children watched mothers fish out the bones, picking at the scraps before they disappeared into the broth. The smell drifted through terrace kitchens, a signal that supper would be hot and filling even if nothing else was certain. Oral histories recall the pride in a well-made batch, the way a single purchase could stretch across days, and the satisfaction of a meal that turned bones into sustenance. Yet bacon bones vanished from butchers' counters as supermarkets demanded uniform cuts and waste became someone else's problem. Today, bacon bones soup is a memory, its recipe preserved only in the kitchens of those who refuse to forget. Woolton pie stood as the symbol of wartime thrift, a vegetable dish so famous it carried the name of the Minister of Food himself. Housewives filled pie dishes with diced potatoes, carrots, swede and cauliflower, bound with a thin gravy and topped with a crust of mashed potato or pastry made without fat. By 1941, Woolton pie appeared on tables and in British restaurants across the nation, its bland but filling presence the answer to meat rationing and the need to feed millions on almost nothing. The taste was mild, the texture soft, and the appearance unremarkable, yet for a generation shaped by war, it meant survival. Children ate without enthusiasm, mothers served with quiet determination, and fathers accepted the pie as the price of victory. Oral histories recall the smell of boiled vegetables, the heavy slices cut from battered enamel dishes, and the relief when meat finally returned to the table. Yet Woolton pie did not survive the peace. As rationing ended and abundance returned, the vegetable pie faded from memory, its name becoming a punchline rather than a badge of honor. Today, Woolton pie is a historical curiosity, remembered only by those who lived through the years when nothing could be wasted, and every meal was a small act of defiance. Rag pudding filled the Lancashire table with a heft that belied its humble origins, a suet parcel so dense it could silence the hungriest mill worker. Housewives rolled out suet pastry, filled it with minced beef or mutton, onions, and a generous seasoning of salt and pepper, then wrapped the lot in a cloth and boiled it for hours until the kitchen filled with a rich, meaty steam. By 1955, rag puddings sold for just a few pence at market stalls in Oldham and Rochdale, their grey, unpromising exteriors hiding a filling that burst with savoury juices at the first cut. Children watched mothers lower the parcels into bubbling water, learning early that patience was the price of a proper pudding. The taste was rich and satisfying, the texture dense enough to stretch a shilling into a feast. Oral histories recall the pride in a well-made rag, the arguments over who got the thickest slice, and the way a single pudding could feed a family of 6 with bread on the side. Yet rag pudding could not survive the supermarket age. The skill of wrapping and boiling faded as convenience foods filled the freezers, and the cloth-wrapped parcels vanished from market stalls. Today, rag pudding survives in a handful of Lancashire shops, a living relic of the suppers that kept the mills turning. Groaty pudding anchored the black country table with a richness that turned the cheapest ingredients into something almost celebratory. Housewives layered groats, the hulled grains of oats, with shin of beef, onions and leeks in a heavy pot, then baked for hours until the oats swelled and the meat fell apart. By 1958, Groaty pudding appeared on tables across Dudley, Wolverhampton and beyond, its thick, porridge-like texture the answer to cold nights and empty pockets. The smell, earthy and meaty, drifted through back-to-back terraces, a signal that supper was nearly ready. Children watched mothers stir the pot, learning that the groats must be soaked overnight, and the cooking could not be rushed. The taste was deep and satisfying, the oats absorbing every drop of the meat juices until no 2 spoonfuls were quite the same. Oral histories recall the ritual of the Saturday Groaty, the pride in a well-made batch, and the fierce local loyalty to a dish that belonged to the black country alone. Yet Groaty pudding could not survive the supermarket age. Groats vanished from shelves, replaced by rolled oats that would not hold together, and the slow, patient cooking fell out of fashion. Today, Groaty pudding survives only on Stir-Up Sunday and in the kitchens of those who refuse to let it die. Bacon ribs and cabbage brought the taste of thrift to tables across the industrial north. The dish stretched the cheapest cut into a meal for the whole family. Butchers sold ribs still clinging with scraps of meat for just pennies a pound, knowing that hours of boiling would draw out flavor enough to season an entire pot. Housewives simmered the ribs with wedges of cabbage, carrots, and potatoes until the meat fell from the bone and the vegetables turned soft and sweet. By 1954, bacon ribs appeared on tables from Leeds to Liverpool. Their smoky, porky broth, the answer to wages stretched too thin. Children picked at the bones, searching for the last shreds of meat. Fathers soaked bread in the cooking liquor, and mothers divided the cabbage with careful precision. Oral histories recall the smell filling the kitchen, the satisfaction of a pot that fed 6 on 6pence, and the pride in wasting nothing. The taste was salty and rich, the broth thick enough to warm from the inside out. Yet bacon ribs could not survive the supermarket revolution. The cheap cuts vanished as butchers closed and demand for uniform joints increased. Today, bacon ribs and cabbage is a memory. Its recipe preserved only in the stories of those who grew up when every scrap had a purpose. Number 5. Lobby warmed the Staffordshire potteries when the kilns had cooled and workers trudged home through the smoke. It was a stew so simple it needed nothing but time and whatever the larder could spare. Housewives layered chunks of beef or mutton with potatoes, onions, and carrots in a heavy pot, added water to cover, and left the lot to simmer for hours until the meat turned tender and the potatoes broke down into the broth. By 1955, lobby appeared on tables across Stoke-on-Trent and the surrounding towns, its thick, comforting mass the taste of home. The name itself was old, perhaps from lobscouse, perhaps from something older still, but the dish needed no history to earn its place at the table. Children watched mothers adjust the pot, adding water if it thickened too fast, while fathers returned from the factories expecting a bowl waiting and a fire burning. Oral histories recall the arguments over the proper consistency, the way each family claimed their version was best, and the quiet satisfaction of a meal that asked for nothing but gave everything. Yet lobby could not survive the supermarket age unchanged. The slow simmer fell out of fashion, and the ready meals that filled the freezers offered speed without soul. Today, lobby survives in pockets of Staffordshire tradition, but the everyday suppers that once defined the potteries have largely vanished. Number 4. The Bedfordshire clanger solved the problem of the working man's dinner and pudding in one ingenious parcel. A suet roll with savoury filling at one end and sweet at the other. Housewives rolled out suet pastry, spread one half with minced meat and onion, and spread the other with jam or sweetened apple. They then sealed the roll and boiled or baked it until the kitchen filled with a confusing, wonderful scent. By 1952, clangers appeared in the lunch pails of agricultural workers across Bedfordshire, their dual nature the answer to a day in the fields with no time to return home. Children learned to eat from the right end first, savoury before sweet, and mothers marked the pastry with a notch so no one would bite into jam expecting gravy. The taste was hearty and comforting, the suet crust dense enough to survive a morning in a cloth bag, and the surprise of sweetness at the end, a small reward for honest labour. Oral histories recall the pride in a well-made clanger, the arguments over proper fillings, and the way a single roll could carry a man through a 10-hour day. Yet the Bedfordshire clanger could not survive the supermarket age. The packed lunch gave way to the sandwich and the ready meal, and the skill of rolling a proper clanger faded. Today, artisan versions enjoy a modest revival, but the everyday clangers that once fueled the harvest have largely disappeared. Number 3. Titty auggie filled the Cornish miner's pocket. When the price of beef climbed too high for a proper pasty, a humble parcel that made virtue of the potato's abundance. Housewives crimped suet pastry around a filling of sliced potato, onion, and a little bacon fat or dripping, baking until the crust turned golden and the inside steamed with simple, earthy goodness. In the tin mines of the 1930s and the 1940s, tiddy auggies sustained men who could not afford the beef and turnip of a traditional pasty. Their dense, filling mass, the answer to long shifts and small wages. The name came from the Cornish word for potato, tiddy, and the affectionate auggie for pasty, a term that marked out the poor man's version from its wealthier cousin. Children ate tiddy auggies at school, mothers packed them for the ball, and fathers held them by the crimped edge, knowing the arsenic on their hands must never touch the filling. Oral histories recall the pride in a well-crimped tiddy, the way a single pasty could fill a stomach for hours, and the quiet resilience of a dish born from having nothing but potatoes and hope. Yet tiddy auggies could not survive the supermarket age. The Cornish pasty became a protected brand, and the potato version faded from memory. Today, tiddy auggies are a curiosity, known only to those who remember when the mines were open and every penny counted. Blind Scouse fed the Liverpool docks when the meat had run out, and payday was still a distant hope, a stew so poor it contained nothing but vegetables and faith. Housewives filled the pot with potatoes, carrots, onions, and whatever scraps the garden could spare. They simmered the lot for hours until the potatoes broke down into a thick, comforting mash. By 1950, Blind Scouse appeared on tables in the back-to-backs of Everton and Bootle. Its name, a quiet admission that the meat which gave proper Scouse its richness was simply not there. Children ate without complaint, knowing that blind was better than nothing, while mothers stretched the pot with extra water and fathers pretended not to notice. The taste was mild and earthy, the texture soft and filling, and the smell drifting through terrace kitchens was the smell of making do. Oral histories recall the ritual of the Friday blind Scouse, the hope that next week there might be a bone for the pot, and the fierce pride in a dish that refused to let hunger win. Yet blind Scouse could not survive prosperity. As wages rose and meat became cheap, the meatless stew faded from tables, replaced by its richer cousin or forgotten entirely. Today, Blind Scouse is a memory, its name invoked only by those who remember when Liverpool fed itself on nothing but stubbornness. Scouse crowned the Liverpool table as the ultimate expression of Dockland thrift. Housewives filled heavy pots with cheap cuts of beef or mutton, potatoes, carrots, and onions, simmering the lot for hours until the meat fell apart and the broth turned thick and savory. The potatoes broke down into the gravy, the meat stretched further than anyone thought possible, and the smell drifting through the kitchen was the smell of home. In the tenements of Scotland Road and the terraces of Anfield, Scouse was more than a meal. It was identity. It was served with pickled red cabbage and hunks of bread, eaten in near silence after long days on the docks. By 1955, Scouse appeared on tables across Merseyside, its rich, meaty flavour the answer to cold nights and hard work. Children watched mothers stir the pot, learning early that the secret was time and nothing more. Oral histories recall the pride in a well-made batch, the arguments over the proper cut of meat, and the sense of community that came from sharing a pot with neighbours. Fathers returned from the ships and the warehouses grateful for a bowl that asked nothing but gave everything. The taste was rich and honest, the texture thick enough to coat the spoon, and the ritual of the weekly Scouse was as old as the docks themselves. Yet Scouse could not survive the supermarket age unchanged. The cheap cuts vanished from butchers' counters, replaced by shrink-wrapped portions too lean to give the stew its proper body. The ready meals that appeared on supermarket shelves bore little resemblance to the original, their thin gravies and uniform chunks a pale imitation of the real thing. As the docks closed and the terraces were cleared, the communal pots that once fed whole streets disappeared. Today, Scouse survives in pubs and the kitchens of those who refuse to forget, but the everyday suppers that once defined Liverpool have largely vanished. The stew that gave a city its name has become a symbol rather than a sustenance, a memory of the meals that kept the docks alive when there was nothing else to give. Across all 15 entries, from the desperate kettle broth that opened our list to the triumphant Scouse at the very top, these forgotten British dinners tell a powerful story of survival, ingenuity, and quiet pride. Some dishes, like blind Scouse and Woolton pie, stand out as the starkest reminders of times when there was simply nothing left, while others, such as rag pudding and Groaty pudding, reveal how regional traditions shaped the working-class table in ways that supermarket uniformity could never replicate. The common thread throughout is resourcefulness, the ability to turn bones into broth, scraps into rissoles, and potatoes into something that felt like plenty. These were not meals of choice, but of necessity. Dishes born in kitchens where waste was unthinkable and every penny had to stretch until payday. Yet for the families who ate them, these poor man's dinners were also the taste of home, the smell of mothers working miracles with almost nothing, and the warmth of tables where everyone was fed, even when the larder was bare. This ranking is not just about what disappeared from our kitchens, but what these dishes represent: the resilience of working-class Britain, the deep cultural memory woven into every simmering pot, and the quiet tragedy of a prosperity that forgot where it came from. In the end, these 15 lost dinners are more than recipes. They are the taste of a generation that made do, stretched every shilling, and found comfort in meals that cost almost nothing, but meant everything. The pots have cooled, the recipes have faded, but the memory of what was lost lingers on, a reminder of the suppers that vanished when Britain forgot how to be poor.